Okay, this is Parker Woods interviewing camera. This is Parker Woods interviewing Cameron Cobb via Zoom call on November 16th, 2020 at 10:43 a.m. We will be discussing Cameron's experience of growing up in Brunswick, Georgia as a biracial woman, her perceptions of the Trump presidency, and how moving away from home has changed the way she viewed her place in this world. So I think a good place to start is telling me about where you grew up. Could you tell me about the community and the people?
Yeah, so I grew up in Brunswick, Georgia. Usually have to explain that it's really close to St. Simon's Island for people to know where that is. But it is the Golden Isles, Glenn County. Um, the people there are, it's really interesting because there's two big demographics of like really rich people and people who are impoverished kind of shoved together, and we can see that in our public high schools, but the high school that I went to was more in the middle. So I got to grow up around people who had a similar lifestyle as me, but I was still exposed to many different people who I didn't relate with necessarily, but I had to as we grew up. I just kind of saw all kinds of different people and from different backgrounds, and even within my own family, um, there's a lot of different people from different backgrounds. So Brunswick is made up of all kinds of different people and personalities. Um, but I would say primarily uh, country people. I don't know if that's a fair assessment.
Yeah, like maybe like conservative
Yeah,
Christian
yeah,
Southern, like have been there for a long time. Uh,
yeah. It's generations and generations of families. Like my parents grew up in Brunswick, so we're all just there by fate.
yeah, my I know like with my grandparents, they've been there since the 60s. I feel
Yeah.
like we get a lot of the generations not leaving. I was gonna ask a little bit about your family as well during this time, like your mom and your dad's side. You can go in depth or whatever.
Both of my parents went to Brunswick High School like I did. Um, my mom's side of the family is from Albany, Georgia, and they relocated to Brunswick because of some other family that I had that lived in Brunswick. Um, but my mom's family is kind of like estranged for multiple reasons, but I would say a big reason that we are not in contact with most of her family is because we're black.
Oh my god. Oh,
That barriers or just like creates disagreements in many different ways. And my dad's family also lives in Brunswick, and I'm not particularly close with them either, just because our lifestyles are so different at this point. And on both sides, I'm kind of like the sedity college kid who knows everything. So I feel like separated from my family in that way. I think that's one of the challenges that come with being a first generation student is at some point you outgrow people, or I don't even know if outgrowing is the word, but I just my life looks so much different than everybody else's that we're losing points of connections, which means that I need to work harder to keep those connections because they're my family. But yeah, all my family is still around Georgia. I mean, Brunswick for the most part, or in Georgia somewhere.
so to clarify, do you think being educated like is what causes that barrier or like gives it the most power?
I think that um, there's a lot of challenges with being more than one race in a society that pits those two races against each other in general. So I think it's kind of started off with like the friends that I chose to have growing up and those kinds of things. And now it's turned into more of like, I just don't relate with them as well anymore. I don't know. I think that it's kind of pretentious for me to say it's my education.
Yeah.
Um, but it is getting like people think I'm like brainwashed because I'm educated. So whatever that means.
So when do you think you became interested in civil rights and justice? Was there a defining moment, or are there a few instances you can think of?
So, I think as soon as I started to like reveal my identity to myself and figure out who I was, it became more important to me. But it was definitely slowly over time. And it started off as an interest in politics. And I like to watch Scandal. And I was interested in like, being able to create change. But then as I got into college and I had to pick a major and those kinds of things, I was like, there's no way I'm going to do political science. And I'm not interested in the elections or the power or anything like that. And it was more civil rights for me. The core of like what my passions were is to help people like me, who look like me, who talk like me. And even I think I feel some kind of like obligation to fight for civil rights because I feel like that's the only reason that I have what I have and I've gotten to where I am. So I have like this tiny voice in my head telling me to like go in this route because this is the route that other people went on to allow me to have this experience that I'm having. So I think that's the main thing for me.
Sorry. When you said, I had never thought of it that way. When you said it was kind of an obligation.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
wow. Yeah, I've just never considered, wow.
I definitely don't think that it has ever been a choice for me. I mean, I think about even with my book and stuff, writing it about my race, and that's not even necessarily a choice that I wanted to make. This is just what I know about. And like all of these decisions feel like they were made for me. It's just kind of like me leaning into my purpose. I don't feel like I ever chose any of this. It's just what comes natural to me. It's the life that I have that I just was granted, and I just try to lean into it at this point.
So, before we get further into your life story, there are like a few things from your book that I kind of wanted you to maybe expand on or just give the story in this interview. First being, if you could talk about, if you feel comfortable talking about um, you being in the classroom in second grade when you were introduced to your identity.
Yeah.
If you wouldn't mind sharing.
I guess I'll retell it a little bit. So it's crazy because this moment is like crystal clear in my memory. Like I can literally imagine it. I'm a very visual person anyways, but it's like every time I think about it, it's just like I'm there again. And so that shows like how impactful that was on me and has been for 20 years after, not 20, more like 15. Um, so in second grade, I remember we were learning about Martin Luther King, and my teacher, it was still like one of those like projectors things where you write on them and it's projected on the wall, early 2000s. And she was just like, Martin Luther King is the reason that people like Cameron's parents can be together. And that was like the first moment that I realized that my parents weren't like everybody else's and that I wasn't like everyone else. Because up until the second grade, I was nice and coddled and never, I mean, in that, I didn't make it very far, but second grade, I made it to second grade and like had no idea, thought I was a normal person. And until she said that, I was like, what do you like? I'm thinking in my head, like, what do you mean, like Cameron's parents? But it's crazy how I didn't react because it's like that was my first time that I had to like just be confused and like annoyed and all of these feelings. That was the first time that I just had to like suck in those emotions, and I had to continue to do that. So first time for everything. And I thought it was kind of weird, but I was like, maybe I'm overreacting, I don't know. And then all of my friends in class were like, so like what do you mean, like her, your parents aren't the same race, like your mom's white, your dad's black, like. And whenever I would get those questions, this is a really weird thing, they would always ask me, is one of your parents dead? And I would be like, what? Like, just because my dad is black, they asked me if he's alive. And I thought it was so weird. And I honestly kept continuing to get that like years after. It's like, is your dad alive? And I would be like, yeah. Random question.
It's important to add that your dad's also in the military.
Yeah. Yeah. My dad's also in the military.
Which
He would be gone a lot, which is like plays into that absent dad story. And I think people kind of assume that if they didn't know he was in the military, that I just didn't have a dad, when that wasn't the case. But yeah,
not that.
I graduated with those same kids who were like, so you can have a black boyfriend or a white boyfriend or da 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 da. Like that was all they. I mean, they like for the rest of grade school until I graduated high school, those questions continued to come from that day forward.
Let's see. I want to kind of continue with this a little bit, as long as you're still comfortable. Okay. Let's go into like middle school era, because in your book, some things that stood out to me are like you had some big changes going on and like the way you saw yourself with your friends. Like the group you were hanging out with outside of Cariel was primarily white girls.
Yeah.
Could you just tell me a little bit about that time first?
Yeah, for sure. So when I think about middle school, I think something that like impacted my middle school experience a lot was the fact that we just got social media. And so while I had all of like the normal middle school problems, I also had the fact that I was a black person in a predominantly white friend group, and also we were being introduced to the internet for the first time, and we were like some of the first people on the internet and the first people making social profiles and all of those things. So if anything, like middle school was the most overwhelming time ever, because there was like so much cyberbullying, ridiculous amounts of cyberbullying. And now that we're older, it makes sense because like none of us knew, like we just got handed these devices and there were no rules, there were no limits on it. You could say and do whatever you wanted, and we didn't really have anyone before us to have experienced that. We were like the guinea pigs on social media, on Facebook and all of that stuff. And so I just remember boys being really mean. I think they're really mean in middle school anyways, but it's different when it's on the phone too, and it's on these social platforms. And I don't know, like the boys at my school in middle school were so mean and had nothing better to do than to torment us constantly. And it kind of like allowed us to create a sisterhood for the first time and kind of bond together, because they were like picking on all of us girls. But even within like just the girls, I felt separated from them when it came to like us straightening our hair or like all kinds of little things like that. But I will say, luckily, like I made some friends that I had for the rest of forever, and they grew with me and they learned with me. And now I know a lot of their comments that they made were so innocent and they just didn't know any better. My best friend in the 8th grade told me like, I love coming to your house and like being with your family, but it's in the Bible that white and black people can't be together. And I was like, girl, no, it's not in the Bible. That's not in the Bible. And we were in the 8th grade, so we're not like that's pretty old to be thinking things like that still. And I feel like ever since that moment, like I changed her life and her perception on other people. And I didn't really know what to do with that information. So I just told the entire class that she thought it was not okay for white and black people to be okay. I mean, be together. And the whole class was like, dude, are you serious? And so I think the public humiliation, it really stuck with her. And I was like, now you see how it feels to be the black sheep here, huh? But yeah, like just moments like that of having to be the one to teach white girls, having to be their educator, which I don't mind because it's where we were in South Georgia, like somebody.
I think it's important to state at this part in the interview that like you and I have been friends.
Yeah,
we met when we were like 12.
we were like 5th grade, I think.
Something like that. But like you definitely helped educate me along the way in certain things as well.
And a lot of it is like you don't even, it's just you're being friends. Like a lot of these were just some of my best friends, and I was just being myself, and they were just being themselves, and we got to teach each other along the way. And that's like the most beautiful part, because I had a lot of people from middle school and high school text me about my book and be like, oh my God, I hope like I never made you feel uncomfortable. And I'm like, no, not especially the girls. No, it was more of like a exchange. Like we were teaching each other. They were teaching me how like white women would probably continue to be in my life, and like I was raised by a white woman, so it wasn't, I'm used to it. Like it was, I feel like me and my mom have did this back and forth thing of teaching each other and learning, and so never uncomfortable. If anything, I'm thankful that I have the privilege to like be an influence on other people.
And I think like from the area we're from, what you're talking about, these exchanges, is really like the biggest impact we can have like on our community, because there are a lot of things that aren't talked about or taught. And I know that's across the state of Georgia, but I feel like a lot of the ignorance that we have is related to people staying in the same place, and not really getting, an experience that their parents didn't have before them or their grandparents.
Yeah, for sure. And it's like if you think about the South historically, it's really not shocking that this is the way things are. This system has been made to keep these things going and going and going. And I just like imagine myself coming into the world as this biracial person that is black and white. It feels like my purpose here is to do something and to like help mend this huge gap. And obviously I can't do it by myself, but I could be a part of this change. And it started with me being in middle school as a 7th grader, taking in these white girls and being like, hey, you can date a black boy. You're not gonna die. Like it started off so small, like that.
That it's not a crime. It's not. People shouldn't look at you negatively because you do that.
Yeah. And I think even my family was a good like representation of white and black people can be together and be fine and have a nice life, and we're normal. I think that was like a big deal for my friends to come to our house and like we were normal. So
Okay, so let's see. Before, I want to talk about Cariel a little bit too, and like where her friendship fell into all of that, like during this time in your life.
Yeah. So to be completely frank, around middle school, well, me and Carl met in the 4th grade, and it was like love at first sight. Like right when we met, we were just the same kind of. We're both Aries, so we are just these full of fire little girls, and we just clicked immediately. But once we got into middle school, I feel like, and me and her have talked about this many times, I was like a lot more welcomed into the white circles just because I was half white, and their white parents were friends with my white mom, and it was a lot easier transition. Whereas Cariel um, wasn't so accepted, not as easily. She was just like the token black girl, and I was a token mixed girl, and there's not a big difference in those two things, but there's a difference. And like me having a white parent made a difference in middle school to people. Me being lighter skinned made a difference. And I remember in the 6th grade, she made another black best friend, and her mom wouldn't let her hang out with me anymore without her other best friend. And I was just like, I don't get it. Like, I don't understand why I can't hang out with my best friend. This is weird. Like, fight to hang out with her all the time. Her mom wouldn't let us hang out, whatever. And then it got into high school, and there was just like periods of time where her mom did not want us to hang out, or like all these things. And now I know it's because I was hanging out with all of these white people, and people were just saying like Cameron is so like white, like she thinks she's white, like she's not safe to hang out with her because she'll get you in situations that black people don't need to be in. And while like that makes sense to me now as an adult, it didn't to me at the time, and nor did I even understand. I just thought, I don't understand why she can't hang out with me. I'm not getting it, whatever. But that was like a lot of the reason why. I would do things that black kids shouldn't be doing if they want to have a productive life, and I think I was teeter-tottering on that line. And they were just kind of like, you don't need to hang out with her because obviously she doesn't understand she's black, and she can go to jail at any moment or get hurt, or face consequences that white people won't face. And I didn't realize that because my mom was white, and I did not have those, like, I didn't have that lesson of like, listen, when you go outside, people think you're black and you need to behave like you were somebody who has a target on your back. I did not know that. I was completely oblivious to it. So that created a lot of like tension in our friendship without us even knowing. It would manifest in different ways, like boy problems, or we're not, we're arguing about dumb stuff, but it was all of these things underneath that weren't helping us, because like even between us it was this like, I don't know, this clash. Like we couldn't be these token black people in the same space because there's some kind of competition, and that has always been there. But it's so beautiful that now it's like the day we graduated high school, I feel like all of that was left behind me. I felt like that was the most freeing thing ever, is to finally know I'm leaving this town. All of these stereotypes, all of this baggage that I've had on me, that I've been carrying on me since an elementary schooler, I'm not tied to it anymore. And our friendship has blossomed since then. And since we went through all of that together, we understand each other in a different way. We understand ourselves and our race in a different way. Being like the quirky black girls was kind of like who we've always been, and got ostracized for it a lot. Like we like to listen to all kinds of different music, Paramore and all these things, and people never really understood us, and feel like people like wanted us to not be together because we were too powerful. And now as adults, I mean, she's in the military now, so that comes full circle, but she's gone. But our energy is still like so strong, and we get to talk about all of these things together, and it's really healing. It's therapeutic, truly.
That is, that was more than you wrote in your book. I didn't know a lot of that. I liked,
Yeah.
I I didn't even have a chance to ever meet Cariel before she just became my friend or a part of my life. Like, I remember her calling me on my 16th birthday and telling me happy birthday, and I don't think I'd ever like hung out with her in person. We would just like tweet back and forth.
That's
And
super.
she calls me like in my mom's car, like before school. We're at Starbucks, and I'm like, "Who is this?" And she's like, "Happy 16th birthday, Parker!"
That's so
But,
hard. That's funny.
um, so now we're gonna go to like our senior year, to the 2016 election.
Yeah.
So the first thing I want to talk about before we really get into the election is that football season.
Mm,
What I want you to explain is like obviously the rivalry,
yeah.
um, your position at your school then,
Yeah.
um, just kind of like socially as well, like,
Yeah.
and I will like come back and like maybe go into the incident, and then I may say some stuff after that.
So, this football season that we're talking about, it was our 11th grade football season, I think, when all of that stuff happened. It wasn't our senior year because, yeah, like Fagan and them were seniors, so we were juniors.
Okay.
Mm.
Um, then let's talk about that, and then we'll get into the election. I don't.
I
It's
didn't
okay. It's okay. This professor never had her.
know.
Anyway.
So, so basically, just from the get go, um, Brunswick High and Glen Academy, the only two public schools in our town, hate each other and have this huge rivalry. And I have a theory. This has nothing to do with with football, because high school football is not this serious, but it's more about the identities of the people at these high schools. And like I mentioned before, Glen Academy is like these super uber rich kids, and they have like really poor kids too, shoved in one school. And Brunswick High is like lower class and middle class, but there's not anything like everyone is like relatively the same.
Can I say something about Glen Academy?
Yeah,
District 8 housing. The school's been there since 1788, and District 8 housing was built around it sometime in like the 70s or 80s. Um, and the zoning has a lot of kids from St. Simon's. So any kid that doesn't go to private school goes there, as well as all of the kids in the area, which leads to like a huge difference in class, and even like access to education. Sorry, I just had to.
think I think people's first idea is like, isn't that a good thing that rich kids and like poor kids get to go to school together? But really, it just creates more inequality and hatred, as we have seen. In a perfect world, that would be like, oh my God, everyone's friends, but like, absolutely not. It just like people, if you don't wear these certain clothes, then you're looked down on. If you don't have this car, then you're looked down on, all of those types of things, when you could be going to a school with people like you and you don't really have as many of those problems. At Brunswick High, we had those people cared about what you wore and what car you drove, but no one was super rich. So, we all had jobs. It just wasn't that big of a deal at our school, but it definitely was at Glen Academy.
Whereas you have kids with
Yeah,
like Mercedes and Jeeps that just turned 16 and
literally.
won't see a day of work, which great for their parents, great for them, but it's a very different environment. And our schools are 10 minutes from one another.
Literally. And so, of course, like, we hate each other. Of course, me as a Brunswick High kid, I hated Glen Academy kids because, to me, in my eyes, it looked like entitlement. It looked like these people who don't understand what real life is like. And, they hated us because we were trashy and we were ignorant, and we would say and do things that they would never be bold enough to do. And since we had these social media platforms, all this was heightened. And I don't, how to explain myself socially is kind of hard. But I would say, because I capitalized off the fact that I was mixed and could fit in every crowd, I really like used that to my advantage, and decided to become a spokesperson for my high school whenever I felt like it. And that's the best way that I can explain it. So there would be times like I would get on Twitter and just kind of stir the pot, because like I genuinely hated these kids at this other school so much. Like so much. And I wouldn't even say it was jealousy, because I wanted what they had. Their entire existence made me angry. I hated them. I hated the things they did. I hated the parties they had, the way that they hung out. And of course, we did our own thing, but it was just like, ew. Like, I had constant drama with those people. It was always just this tension. Always. There's underlying tension of like, I don't like who you are and you don't like who I am, so let's hate each other kind of ordeal. And of course, I had friends at Glen Academy like Parker, and I had a few other friends that I was honestly very close with, which is like funny to look back on, because a lot of my good friends now went to Glen Academy. Literally, like I have like a few, but even then, like they remember me having this like big discourse, and I would tweet people at Glen Academy to try to piss them off, to try to get my revenge, or try to hold them responsible for the things that they do. And it would start off very simple, of me just being like, go Pirates, my mascot, go Brunswick High. And then they would be like, oh, you're stupid, like I hate you, like you're so da 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 da, and they would attack me immediately. Like, I think me being a female was more of an issue than me even being a person of color, because in our town it's like, how dare you say what you feel like if you're a woman? Like, you don't do that. Like, for you to be a girl and to have an opinion is just not allowed. Not okay. And things like that, knowing that in the back of my head, fueled me to do it more. It's like, y'all really hate the fact that I am saying what I want to on my Twitter platform, so I'm going to keep doing it. I'm going to wake up every day and say whatever I want to. And this is where like my civil rights started. Like, this is the kind of things that made me feel more empowered. And eventually, like, it turned into something way bigger, and they would talk about me in these little group meetings and group chats, and we would talk about them in these group chats. And they would put my face on corn because my last name is Cobb, and they would put my face on whatever else. And it was, I am not a person who can be embarrassed, so those things like never really, I didn't care. Like, they would put my face on a corn and I would make it my profile picture, and I would just keep trying to spite them, because I hated all of these rich white males who were attacking me every day. And it was like, I genuinely felt like if I didn't stand up to them, that other girls at my school would think this is okay for men to talk to you whatever way. I don't know why I thought that I was their role model or something, but very pretentious mind was thinking, if I don't stand up for myself, what kind of message am I putting out? Like, am I just going to let these boys run me over? No, I've never been that person. So I would just stand up to them constantly, when it was so emotionally exhausting at the end. Like, every night I would go to sleep and be like, dang, like, I kind of regret, like, I feel like I'm making a fool out of myself, but I'm not just going to let people talk to me however. And then they made a picture of my face on a woman picking cotton and picking corn. And I can't even remember how I finally got this picture. Maybe you remember, but I don't. Yeah, I don't. Yeah, I didn't remember who sent it to me. I figured it was
me. I think so.
I genuinely think throughout all of this, like, you were my only friend at Glen Academy that didn't turn on me. My only one. Like, there was all these other girls that I was really close with, but because I became so controversial, they just separated themselves from me, like, completely. And it wasn't because like they didn't like me anymore. They just didn't want to be known as a person who was friends with me, because then they could be talked about, and that would hurt their social status. And so, yeah, you were really like my realest friend at Glen Academy, for sure. And you sent me the picture, and obviously I'm like, this is so fucked up, for lack of better words, like to the highest extent. But I was shocked that they saw me that way. Like, I think in my little mixed girl mind, it was like, wow, I'm really just a black person. And that was like a lesson that I really needed of, yeah, they put you on a pedestal in this town because you're half white and they allow you to stay and do whatever you want. But you're still just a little black girl. Like, never forget that. And also, like, I was just shocked that people didn't know how inappropriate that is and how big of a deal it was, because as soon as I started to be like, okay, this is all fun and games about football and you're putting my face on corn and stuff, but now you're putting me picking cotton, this is where the line is crossed. It's not funny anymore. It's not about football anymore. You're clearly in that, and that's why I think this is about a lot more and more about our identities and who we are in this place. And that was a very telling sign that y'all were just the black kids at Brunswick High kind of thing. And while there were like so many white people in my friend group, we're just we have more black people at our school. People look at us as a school with black people. And that picture was a representation of what they thought we were. And so I posted it on Facebook and tried to get them in trouble for making that picture of me, and they reported it until it got taken down. So even when I tried to like put them on blast, I feel like I had like no voice again. Like, I can't even share this disgusting picture that y'all made about me without you coming in and like taking it from me. And I don't know that it had like that big of effect on me at the time, just because racism was so normalized. I kind of got over it very quickly and forgot about it and blocked it out of my memory. And it wasn't until like I would tell people this in college and they would literally be like, what are you talking about? Like, that doesn't even seem real. And then that's when I was like, okay, my high school experience wasn't normal, but it definitely took for me to be removed from the environment, because I moved on very quickly from that situation. And I mean, even into our senior year, I continued to be as vocal as I've always been. It didn't scare me or deter me. I was just kind of like, wow, y'all are super racist, and I always knew that, but now I have evidence, and now I have a story to tell that shows how messed up my hometown really is. And later I put it in the book.
Yeah, and that's where when I read about it in your book, it just made me think a lot about just even me like sending you that. Like, and I can't remember, I know at the time it definitely wasn't malicious.
Oh
But
yeah.
like as kids or 17-year-olds, whatever, like even like with the information I know now, I think if I were put in that situation again, like at this age, I would have handled it a lot differently.
Oh yeah.
But whereas at that age, you're like, you get the group me on your phone, and you see it, you're like, my friend needs to know about this,
Yeah.
whether or not at the time, like, even though, like you say, it's not something that like weighed on you a lot then, and like racism was normalized, I think in that same way it was for me too, and as a white woman, not having like the empathy to really like know how it would affect you and sending it, if that makes sense. But they should have been punished, is the essential.
Yeah. And like people would ask me now, like, did they ever get in trouble? And I was like, no. Like, when are people held accountable in
I
our
mean, that's like you and I both sending it to the school, or like you posting it on Facebook, me taking it to, I can't say their name, but someone's parent that worked at the school that I thought would actually do something, and her not being able to actually do anything. Huh?
did that.
Huh?
I never knew you did that.
This, the pretty blonde family,
Oh,
very pretty blonde family, friends with the Clacks.
okay. Yeah.
Yeah. I was just, anyway.
With that, like, the boy who made it goes to Yale now, and um he has messaged me over the years at least 4 or 5 times, like very long messages. He is in feels very deep guilt and shame, and a lot of people are like f him, like no he doesn't, he just feels bad now. And like honestly it's crazy because I treated him with such grace even when it happened, because once I posted on Facebook he came forward and he messaged me and was like, hey, like I made that picture, I honestly didn't realize how much of a big deal it is, but now I see from your post, like he very quickly realized like he really messed up and he should have never made that picture. But a lot of his friends kept defending him and being like, you're dramatic, you're doing too much, as if me a picture of me picking cotton is just me being too dramatic, me being offended by that is just too dramatic for people in Brunswick, Georgia. But he actually immediately was like, whoa, probably shouldn't made this picture, and would text me, and I responded like, dude, I was shocked that you're the one who made this picture. Not gonna lie, considering we went to church together growing up, didn't ever see this coming from you. But I forgive you. Like immediately, I was like, I forgive you. I know that you're just doing this because you think it's gonna help you fit into this popular, rich crowd at your school. And I feel bad for you, honestly, because I don't have to do these things to fit in at my school. And I'm I'm pretty confident within myself and who I am, that I genuinely feel bad for you. And I think that's what I mean. I had a really good support system, and I had friends at my school who were willing to ride for me, and they did, and they absolutely did. When people were attacking me on Twitter, um, they would like join in and like try to get them back or whatever. I don't think that they did enough when it came to that particular picture. They were pretty mute then because I don't think any of us knew what to do when something like that happens. Just teenagers don't know how to navigate these situations. So I mean, a lot of them didn't really have much to say then, but generally I had a really good support system. I knew when I went to school that they would uplift me and make me feel more than like I was just this random black girl. Like they never treated me like that, at least my specific friend group at at my school.
And now that I wanted to just talk about some of those experiences, and now, like, closing, we're going to talk about the 2016 election, the 2020 election, and in between that, kind of how it blends into your college. But I don't think it'll take nearly as long. But and I may have like one follow up question depending on time. But
Okay.
I want you to talk about the 2016 election. Like, you can talk about it domestically if you want, but mainly like how you perceived it at home versus like before and after he was elected.
Yeah. So um I grew up like into politics just because my mom has always really cared about politics, but I think our the policies that we have always been interested were like welfare and things like that, because that's what was directly affecting our family. Not for us specifically, but all of my family, um was on Section 8 housing, lived in the projects, used food stamps, like and so my mom paid really close attention to those kinds of things. As a white woman who is now in a black family and has even impoverished white family, so I cared a lot about it anyways, and that's how I was raised. And so once I got to be a senior in high school, I watched a lot of Scandal, and I was just really into politics in general. And so I knew what a big deal this election was. um, in general, just so like, oh, I was cared a lot about when Obama was elected, even, and we were little kids, just because it was a black man, and I could see even then this is a big deal. This looks a lot different than it normally does. I've never seen a black president before. And then with Hillary Clinton, it was like, this is a woman, this is a big deal. And I could tell also that Donald Trump wasn't your typical candidate, and like, this is a big deal, like everyone should be watching this. I had these like instincts of like, this feels like a bigger deal than people are like in my circles are understanding. And so I would talk about it a lot with my friends and be like, we should be paying attention to this. Like, this is going to matter in the future. Um, just being a 17-year-old who thinks she knows things. And my friends, because of what they were hearing at home and stuff, were immediately like, chill out. Like, you're dramatic. You're making too big of a deal of these things. It's not that deep. Diminished my feelings around it. And I was like, no, you guys, like, y'all are not understanding. This is a big deal. This is like a historic moment. I know this. I know we're only seniors in high school. I know politics doesn't matter to you guys, but it needs to. And I know we can't vote, but this is, and I would go to school every day and be talking about it with my teachers, with my friends. And that's, I think when I realized how much I was like, or it's when I realized how disconnected I was from that area, because people's true colors started to come out and they started to talk about how, they didn't want Mexicans to be in our country and they need to pay up and they need to do this and that. And, Black people shouldn't just be living off the government and all of these things that I've never heard so blatantly was just thrown into my face because this election gave it that platform. And, I mean, I could easily say like I was the only Democrat in my classrooms. I was just doing it on my own by myself. I had this one teacher who really validated me. She really saw me. And I had a boy I liked who really validated me and really saw me. And it was pretty much it. I was doing it all on my own. And there was this other gay boy who I'm still very close friends with to this day. It was us against the entire rest of the school, and they were all conservative and they thought we were crazy and we were stupid, but really our identities were caught up into all of this, and like we were kind of thinking about our future and what life would look like, and Donald Trump wasn't a person that would represent us, and we knew that even at that age. And so I just remember like once again being bullied at school and I couldn't shut up. Like I couldn't shut up about it and I wasn't helping myself. All of the boys would pick on me, call me a stupid libtard, call me this, call me that. Like, you're never going to get a boyfriend acting like this, Cameron. Like, you're never going to being this feminist radical person. And I just kind of had to keep doing it. I knew that it was my duty to be that person. I knew that me being an opposing view would have an effect on them. And I think it really did. And then Trump won. I had to go to school. People were running Confederate flags in the parking lot. It was a lot of hate, of course. They like rubbed it in my face every day at school. And I constantly had these thoughts of like, I hate these people. I hate this place. I never want to come back here. And I'm thankful for that now because I wouldn't have been so like done with it when I went to college. Going back has never been an option for me because I genuinely feel like I don't belong there and that I'm not welcomed. And honestly, in hindsight, that was a good thing for me because it motivated me. And now in 2020, it's sad because it was like a complete repeat of these are two, I'm tired of hearing these are two candidates that neither of us wanted. And we have to pick the lesser of two evils. And that is so annoying for me to hear because we're in a democracy. Why in the world is there two people that nobody wanted to be president running? It doesn't even make sense to me because we're the people and like we choose these people and we control the landscape. It's annoying to me that there's so much cognitive dissonance that we can't get what we want because we're so distracted by these cell phones and capitalism that we literally feel like there are some other forces controlling the landscape when it's us. It's the words we use in our house, in our homes, at school. It's the work that we do every day. And if we're not all waking up every day trying to create change, it's not going to change. We don't wake up and I think there's these narratives like there's just going to be a Martin Luther King to come through and, there'll be peace again. It's not how it works. And Martin Luther King probably didn't think that in 2020 Black men would still be getting shot in the street, because the work is never done. And there's people like that who are pioneers, but the work is absolutely never done. And that is what 2020 has taught me more than anything, is like, no matter what, I wrote myself a letter the night before this election of what I would do if Trump won and what I would do if Biden won, and generally like how I would move forward through this election season. Because in 2016, I was so emotionally invested, I knew that I had to take a different approach this time. So I deactivated all my social media, still deactivated, because I can't handle seeing my uncle make posts about Black people when I'm his family member and I'm Black. I can't handle people talking about, there's people who only want handouts when I know there are people whose lives depend on government assistance. I can't handle that every day. And so in this letter that I wrote to myself, I realized that my life would be the same if Trump or Biden won. And that's a sad reality, but it's real. And it helped me kind of like understand that even if, we get a Democratic government, it doesn't matter. The fight is never over. And I think that is the mistake a lot of people made when Obama won, is like, we're uber comfortable, and now, things are fine. Things are fine. Everything's okay. Ebola comes up, it's fine. We don't have to worry about Ebola. The government will handle it. Trump showed that nothing is ever fine. A virus can come out of nowhere, and if the government isn't in the right place to handle such a thing, that we will all pay for it. And if they're not handling like public discourse well, then we'll all be fighting and marching and rioting, and it all matters. All of our positions in this greater thing matters. In the simulation, it matters. And so yeah, I've done a good job of not getting emotionally invested in this, and I kind of knew that Biden would win just because I had some sort of faith, and I knew that there's no way that we could continue having a president who was mishandling a pandemic. And that was like definitely on my number one thing. I obviously want race relations to be better. I want the economy to be good. I want all of those things, but right now my only care in the world is like this pandemic to be handled properly. And so whoever's going to do that, I'm for it. And so yeah, Biden was elected. Now we're dealing with Trump still trying to be a dictator, which is really interesting. And while I find it annoying, I sort of believe in the law, and I think everything's going to be okay. And I think it's going to be a really good example of what could happen if we're being too comfortable. And I think our generation will be changed for the rest of forever. We will raise our kids differently. We will function differently. We will interact with each other differently, because it is so much growth at once. So I can't even say that. I think this election had less of an effect on me because there's so many things to deal with. Our lives completely changed overnight because of a pandemic. And so, yeah, it's a lot more on the line now, but I don't know. They're merely figureheads to me at this point.
Yeah, like the past few years, like with Trump and like me personally studying history, like you see it, at some point you have to make it like entertaining to cope, because people, especially when they're talking about like the other party, are like so afraid of communism,
Mm-hmm.
we've seen this, and like, do you not realize there's an authoritarian rule like happening right now in the country?
And yeah,
Like the way that this family set up, you're willing to vote for Eric Trump or whatever Trump that runs in 4 years. That's
yeah,
like
scary.
it's not really.
Scary. And once again, like, we can thank social media for all of the misinformation and all of these issues that we're dealing with. I think goes back to like the influx of technology. I think a lot of the things that we will deal with is the fact that technology isn't regulated, and we're dealing with the consequences. And this is the first time, I'm sure Facebook and Twitter didn't know that they'd be the ones to ruin the political landscape, but they did. And now we have a president that tweets.
And
And
like
like,
it's been changed now.
yeah, and they're not going to be held responsible because they're some of the most profitable companies ever.
Um, so well, we'll end this with a lighter question, depending on how you decide to answer. Who's been influential in you finding yourself, good or bad, and why?
Mm. So this is an interesting question. Um, so I would say obviously my mom has been super influential. I think um just growing up with being raised by a woman who is a different race than you is like a really interesting thing in general. And I think it needs to be talked about more just because there are going to be a lot of generations that have these issues now. And I think um, my mom was one of the pioneers. And I, while there was like a lot of mishaps of her not teaching me who I was, I don't think she could have. She tried her best, and the thing that I'm most thankful for is she's always been willing to listen, and even when she didn't understand, she tried to. She's always had Black friends. She's always been really inclusive, so I never had to grow up not having Black people around me, or white. Like, she's had me around all kinds of different types of people from all kinds of different backgrounds, and she literally had her family disown her to be with my dad. That couldn't be a better example of what a strong woman who has really strong beliefs. Like, she showed me it doesn't matter what other people think. It doesn't matter. You know what is right. You know what's wrong. And I've lived my life like that, and I feel like that's the reason that I'm such a bold woman. And I'll say, like, I'm inspired by everyone in Brunswick and all of the different people. I'm helping someone work on a documentary in Brunswick right now, and we're following these teenagers, and there are all kinds of different types of teenagers. Some go to Glen Academy, some go to Brunswick High. Some are super smart and gifted classes, some are super like partiers, and it's crazy because I relate most with the party kids who are doing nothing with their lives. And I just recently realized that, like, wow, that's who my friends were. And I just missed it by like the skin of my teeth, because that would have been me. And somehow they pissed me off so bad during the election, during all the things that we were going through, that I never wanted to come back. But if they wouldn't have, then I could still be there doing the same things as everyone else. And I barely missed it. So I'm inspired by all of those party kids who have no dreams or aspirations, or don't feel like they have a life, or don't have any goals, because I feel bad for them, and I've always seen more in them. Everyone called people at my school trashy and stupid, but I saw them. I saw how talented they were, how funny they were, how smart they were, how creative they were, and they never saw it, and they never got to use those talents. So in a way, I feel this obligation to be here and be a person from Brunswick who got out and created something and is here to tell these stories and talk about what it's like to be there from there.
Yeah, you talked to me about the party thing. Like, I mean, you and I are very fortunate to have both like gotten out of some of the situations we could have been in high school.
Exactly.
We were idiots.
Yeah. One really bad night could have changed our entire lives, and we would not have the education that we wouldn't have the future that we really wanted for ourselves. And I think about that all the time. Like, and it makes me feel kind of guilty sometimes. Like, I'm not deserving. Like, how did I get this and other people didn't? But it's because my parents worked really hard for me to be where I am. They went through a lot. They sacrificed a lot. And it's now I, got given these opportunities, and now it's my turn. I can't feel guilty. It just is what it is. And I hope all I can do is wish for the best for other people.
Yeah. I'm gonna stop recording.